I would say Mark Drury is probably the best deer hunter that ever breathed air. I don't think anybody's put as much work in it. I don't think anybody has loved it as much as he loves it. You know, I fished with Larry Bird, I fished with Bo Jackson, I fished with Dale Earnhardt. Larry Bird was so competitive, and we cut about 90% of that out. He would use some foul language from time to time, so instead of bleeping, we just didn't use it, but it was so funny.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild podcast, powered by DeerCast. A little bit of first form energy this morning.
That's right. You're Tim Chelsvik.
You're Matt Drury. And I'm super excited this morning.
Yeah, we got a great guest today.
We have a huge guest. I do have to say first, I've been surprised at the amount of hate I've taken for my bear kill.
What?
It didn't even cross my mind, but bears are cuddlier than whitetail.
I kind of alluded to that the couple podcasts where we talked about it. People just think about it a little bit differently than, you know, we get a little heat from whitetail, you know, about whitetails, but nothing like bears.
Yeah, my neighbor, so I'm working on the bear rug. Like I'm actually turning it into a wall hanging. And my neighbor came over. She's like, why couldn't you just give that thing a Tootsie Roll? What? And let it be on its way?
And she say, well, it was eating donuts when I shot it.
Well, this thing eats moose calves and bear cubs, and it's not a cuddly sweet. It was pretty big, mean old bear. So,
and
he's feeding my family.
I'm sure, right?
Oh yeah. I offered some of the bear, but her position changed a little bit when I told her we're eating it, and would you like to pet it? And so she petted the fur, and she's like, oh, this is nice. She actually was like, okay, well, I still don't like it, but.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, now you know.
Yeah.
Just another person you had to convert, right?
Yeah, just one more person that doesn't like me. They just like me. They dislike me less than they did
you
before.
Say, lady, get in line.
That's the best I can hope for. Well, so you alluded to a killer guest this morning.
That's right.
So as a kid who grew up watching TNN and ESPN and watching hunting and fishing shows, I'm super geeked out.
Yeah, so we have Hank Parker with us today. Before Hank comes on, I want you to read a few of the accolades, because this guy's a living legend, and he's been doing it for a long, long time, and a guy that I know Mark, Terry, all of us here at Drury Outdoors really look up to and appreciate the friendship.
And he does not slow down. So he hosts a podcast, Off the Water with Hank Parker. He's been a host of Hank Parker's Outdoor Magazine on Sportsman Channel. That's, I think, been around since 85 or so. Like that's classic in and of itself. Yeah. He's a member of the Legends of the Outdoors Hall of Fame, International Game and Fish Association Hall of Fame inductee, Bass Fishing Hall of Fame inductee, two-time Bassmaster Classic champion, which that's like the heavyweight champion. To win that twice is unreal. First angler to win the Grand Slam of bass fishing. And for some reason, somehow we got him on the pod.
What's up, Hank?
I'm doing great, man. It's always a pleasure to hang out with the Drurys. I love Mark and Terry, so it's only natural that I love you guys. So this is awesome. I appreciate you having me on.
We're lucky. That's how we open a lot of doors that we shouldn't be able to.
You should see the surprise on some guests' faces when they're like, oh, Mark and Terry aren't here. We got the B team hosting this show.
Yeah, they're way too smart for that. They're out scouting. They're doing fun things. They're not doing podcasts.
Yeah, I think Terry's probably on the water at Lake of the Ozarks somewhere, and Mark, I'm sure, is looking at trail cam pictures already.
No doubt about that. No doubt.
Well, Hank, obviously we're singing your praises. You have had such a career and continue to be such a great ambassador for outdoorsmen across the board. I have a bone to pick, though, and I hate to start the show with this kind of tone.
What do you got
there? If you're
there?
watching the show right now.
Yeah, I see that.
Young Tim Chelsvik purchased this at a Walmart in 1991.
Okay.
This is the Hank Parker Classic Spinnerbait.
Okay.
And
skirt has deteriorated.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so maybe it's 30 plus years old.
I'm amazed it's attached.
The twin tail trailer is still intact, but the skirt is a little bit deteriorated. So I'm going to try to process
how much that
refund.
cost you? 99 cents?
At the time, it was probably like $3 or $4 or whatever. But it's like, this is an iconic spinnerbait.
Is it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is Hank. I mean, I remember watching the shows and thinking, all right, I'm in the running for a Bassmaster Classic now because I got this.
So Hank, going back to that time period, how are you making those? When I've listened to your podcast, I listened to the one you did with Dirty Mo with Dale Jr. and you really dug into some of the weeds on the career and the trajectory and all that stuff. And when you're doing something like this, when the sponsorships start coming back then, and you start figuring out the whole licensing game, was that really the aha moment for you of like, okay, here's where my niche can be, or here's the lane that I'm going to go down?
When I started my career, I was kind of second generation. That whole thing started in 1968. Ray Scott had his first tournament over at Beaver Lake. And then by 1971, they had a touring circuit, and I joined in 1977. So I was a little bit like kind of second generation, but nobody had really put together except Bill Dance. Dance kind of had it figured out. Other than Dance, nobody really had it figured out on how you can make a living. And so it was all about getting sponsors and getting yourself in a position that you had enough influence on the consumer public to justify sponsorship. So all those little baits that you see, those things that we brought to market, that all came about as trying to be of value to the sponsors, And so you came up with as many ideas and lure designs and all that stuff that you could kind of justify that sponsorship, because that's the way you made a living.
So when you're coming up with the lure designs, I mean, is it something where it's like, okay, I've been testing, these are things that you've actually kind of came up with from fishing the tournament circuit, and it's like, okay, this worked or that worked a little bit better, and then you actually come up with a design and present it to the sponsor? How's that work? How are you coming up with the product ideas?
Well, actually, the way that spinnerbait came about was I grew up fishing a Zorro spinnerbait. Stan Sloan, who was one of the pioneers, he's a Hall of Fame bass fisherman. He won that first tournament over at Beaver Lake in 1968. Stan Sloan was a lure designer, and he came up with a bait called a Zorro aggravator. And it was just an incredible spinnerbait. Prior to that, there was a little H&H, which was kind of like a clothespin spinner. And so I took that Stan Sloan bait and I thought, man, if this thing had lighter wire, if we could separate those two blades a little bit further and get them where they were out of sync and you could maximize the vibration, it'd be a lot more effective bait. So you just kind of tweak and change and modify as you go. And I kind of came up with a winning combination. I came up with a Colorado blade and an Indiana blade, and I put that thing together. And I won like 3 or 4 tournaments back to back. And then I won the Bassmaster Classic in 1989 on it. And my sponsor then, Man's Bait Company, they said, man, we want that spinnerbait. We want to bring it to market. And that's how it all really came about. But it was never, I didn't sit down at a table and say, hey, I'm going to design a bait to take to market. I sat down in my hotel room with pliers and cutters and all these things, and I built my bait to catch fish with, and it worked out, and I won several tournaments on it. And that's what brought that bait to life.
Unreal. And Hank, you mentioned something that bears a little deeper dive on. Ray Scott turned the largemouth bass into the country's most sought after sport fish. Up until BASS, it was just another fish to catch. And you see,
I think it was famous, but nobody knew it. It was a famous fish. It was kept under wraps. Every region of the country had their own pros that were the hot fishermen on such and such lakes. And Ray just kind of brought all that together. But the bass has always been the sport fish of choice. And it just wasn't revealed. And then when he made it so publicized, then everybody that was a part of that fraternity joined in, and it just kind of steamrolled from there. But Ray knew that there were fishermen all over the country that didn't do anything at all but bass fish.
Mm-hmm.
That was their fish of choice, and so Ray just brought all that together.
Brilliant.
Side note: I think the year that Mark and Terry got inducted into the Legends of the Outdoors Hall of Fame is the same year that Ray Scott was inducted.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure. So
that's
which seems incredible that it took that long for Ray.
No doubt.
I mean, he's.
Well, I actually think that was. I think Mark and Terry and Ray, when the Legend of the Outdoors was formed, I think they were the first inductees. I think they came in on the ground floor. So it didn't take very long. If they weren't the very first year inductees, they were the second year.
Sure. Yeah. So when you think back of those years, a guy like Ray Scott, I think across any industry, whether it's something as silly as you think about like World Wrestling Entertainment, like those years where they combined all those different geographic locations and combined them into one, or whatever NASCAR, being different kind of subsections and cultures and combining them into one, or fishing like this. Like, it just takes somebody with a vision to a bigger vision than I guess anybody at the time. What was Ray Scott like in that regard? I mean, did he think in those days that it was going to get to what it became?
I don't think anybody really foresaw the future and knew that would ever be as big. A lot of people have complimented me over the years saying, man, you had great vision knowing that was going to parlay into something as big as it is. I had no vision whatsoever. I was just doing what I love to do, and I was making a living without having a real job. And that was my whole motive. And I just walked through the doors as they opened, but I had no idea. I don't think Ray did either. I think Ray is a dreamer. Ray was always a dreamer, and nothing was ever big enough for Ray. And as soon as he achieved one plateau, he's automatically wanting to move up another run on the ladder. And so he was highly driven, highly motivated. And he had a lot of vision, but I don't think he ever saw the sport growing to the level it is today. But of course, he had a lot to do with that, and it's pretty amazing. But I don't think he saw all of this that has happened coming together.
There's no room for compromise in your hunting knife. That's why Cold Steel has built a reputation for crafting the toughest, most reliable blades on the planet. From the versatile click and cut to the innovative hunting kit, every Cold Steel knife is a tool that you can trust. Strong, durable, ready for anything. Get yours today at coldsteel.com and experience the difference for yourself.
One of the things I think back, and Hank, I'm curious how your family reacted, because back when you were coming up, being a professional bass fisherman, that was kind of like now
almost
we
non-existent.
we have high school bass clubs and collegiate bass teams, and it's a thing now. But back then, it was. How did your family react to you saying, "I think I'm going to keep pursuing this"?
If you want to see some eyebrows raised, go to your father-in-law and tell him you're going to be a professional bass fisherman.
What were you doing at the time? What was the fallback, or what was the profession?
I had that dream, Matt. I had that dream from a kid, and I didn't ever really look back. Everything that I did was a stepping stone to get me to that point that I could go and get enough money to compete. And nothing really ever worked out. You have all these ideas, you're going to save money, but I never was able to do that. Finally, I just bit the bullet one day. I borrowed $10,000 on a 90-day note. The dumbest thing in the world. And,
that's a quick turnaround.
Oh, man. But it's funny. People say, well, man, you made the money more than any other fisherman in history in your era. And how did you do that, man? Poverty. I had a bank note to pay. I had to make a check. I was going to be in trouble if I didn't. So I was highly driven. But I never really had, I poured concrete and I worked at a sporting goods store. The only two jobs I ever had before I before I took that nasty plunge and borrowed that money.
Yeah, I guess once you do something like that, it's like, okay, I'm all in. Like I mean, how many tournaments after that did you line up to, because I'm assuming you have to travel pretty far and wide to continue to work, right? To continue to try to earn and place and pay that note off.
Everything is geared up in the fishing world toward the year-end event, whether it's called the Classic or the World Championship or whatever it's called. Major League Fishing calls it Red Crest. I don't get that, but it's a championship event. But it's always been structured where there's either 6, 7, 8 events, and you take those tournaments and the top 25 out of those 8 events or 6 events or 10, whatever the number is, they get to go to the Classic or the World Championship or the finals, because that's where all the money's at. Mm-hmm. And that's where the title is. So when you sign up to fish a tournament, you sign up for the season. So I fish national bass, American bass, and BASS all in the same year. So that was 21 tournaments. And so a lot of times you would have a tournament, let's say Lake Okeechobee in Florida. Mm-hmm. And then on Friday, you would load your stuff up and drive across the country to Toledo Bend in Texas. And the tournament practice would start on Sunday and it would end on Friday. And on Friday, when that one would end, you would load your stuff up and drive to Thousand Islands, New York. So you were constantly on the road, and sometimes you were gone from home 4 weeks at a time, fishing tournaments back to back to back. And then obviously you need different lures at Okeechobee in Florida than you need on the St. Lawrence Seaway at Lake Ontario. So you got to have all this stuff packed up in your vehicle and all your boats just loaded down with all kinds of different rods, reels, and tackle, because takes a different rod and reel combination to fish effectively with 6 or 8 pound test line on Lake Ontario than it does flipping the bushes or the grass beds in Lake Okeechobee. So you had to have a variety of baits, and it was just a circus to carry all that stuff and to be gone so long, and it was very demanding.
Mark Drury and Wade, his farm manager, just had their vehicle stolen out west, loaded down with a bunch of turkey gear. You may have seen that. You're rolling around pretty much with a Bass Pro Shop of thousands of dollars.
Your whole life, especially at that time, what would make or break you, right? Like if somebody broke into your stuff and took all of everything you got, that's everything you got, right?
I had that happen to me at Toledo Bend in 1984. I had fished a tournament in Georgia and drove to Toledo Bend, and then we were leaving Toledo Bend going to New York, and they wiped me out at Toledo Bend the next to the last day of the tournament. So I had to borrow tackle to finish the tournament at Toledo Bend, which I finished 4th. I was in great shape to win that tournament. I lost everything. And then I had to borrow tackle and call my sponsors and have stuff shipped into where I was going in New York. And man, you don't get over that for a long time. I'd reach in my tackle box and I'd look for something. I thought, oh God, that got stolen. I don't have it. And so I heard about Mark's vehicle getting stolen and losing all their guns, their camera equipment, everything. Yeah. That is so devastating.
It is. And I'm to your point about there's something, it might be an old favorite that you had for 10 years or what. It's just something that's almost irreplaceable, right? It's not all just new stuff every year. There's certain things, there might be a certain call in Mark's case, or, in your case, like you said, a certain lure that it's special and you've had it forever, and then all of a sudden it's gone. It's like, well, that's just not replaceable.
I still remember as a kid, my dad and I stopped at a gas station after we got done fishing, and for some reason we leaned our fishing rods up against the side of the pickup truck. Well, when we left, we forgot the rods were still on the side of the truck. We backed up and must have run, they fell off. We ran them over and got down the road like, oh crap, we forgot. So we went back. People had taken the reels off the broken rods in the parking lot and stole the reels and just left the busted rods.
Jeez. Must have been pretty good reels.
They were okay, but like when you're a kid at that level,
devastating.
It's devastating because like I can't afford to replace this stuff, and it was just. But it's still stuck in my craw. So
the stories of the road, on the road, you just told one, about your stuff getting stolen. But is there anything else that sticks out, like a moment that it's just like, this could only happen to me on the road? Or if there was anybody around, nobody would believe this. I mean, because when you started, there's not like handy cameras and GoPros and all the stuff that's easy to take with you now. Back then, when you're starting, I mean, the cameras are the size of briefcases. It's a much different vibe.
We were doing a show on Lake Wiley one time, which is a lake that I lived on for years and years and years. And Charlie Wilsey was my cameraman, and I had my boat, had all my tackle, and everything that I had was in my boat. And we stopped at a little steakhouse to get some dinner, and Charlie said, "No, I don't like parking around here. There's somebody else steal the camera." I said, "Charlie, look how many rods and reels I got in this boat. The last thing gonna be on their mind is breaking in my car, stealing my camera. They're gonna steal all these rods and reels out of this boat. So we ain't got to worry about that camera." So we go in there and eat. We come back out. The back glass is broken out of my Suburban. The only thing they took was the camera.
Oh no! And what was that? Probably $100,000, back then.
Oh yeah. It was an Ikegami 79 with a big Canon lens on it, and the camera without the lens was like 75,000. So it was probably $100 and something grand. And then in those days, you didn't have a recording deck built into the camera, so you had to have all these umbilical cords, and you had a separate recording deck, and there were no wireless mics. You had to have a hardwire mic, and so you had all that cord that coordinated all the time codes with the camera to the sound device, and they stole all that stuff, and it was probably $150,000 worth of stuff.
Yeah, and that's pretty devastating. It's because I think that's what most people don't understand about producing television, even to this day. Like all the equipment, all that stuff, that's on you. That's yours, right? It's not like the network sending people with you. I guess other than maybe like say Major League Fishing, they're sending their camera crews to produce that. But when you're filming your own show and your own content, that's all your equipment. And back then, in those days, if you're on TNN or ESPN or whatever, they had pretty strict guidelines, I'm assuming, on how you had to, the equipment you had to have, how you had to produce, and then you're just on the hook for it, right?
Oh man, it was crazy. TNN wanted us to do a 2-camera shoot, so we had to have 2 cameras, and we went to the M format. And then after about 2 years, they obsoleted the M format and said, "No, we got to go to Betacam." Betacam cameras were about $90,000 for the whole package with the lens and all, so you had to have 2 of those. And then we just, I got a room called the dinosaur room. That's about $4 million worth of cameras in there that are worth about maybe $100.
I was going to say a couple $100. We got one of those too. Next to all the source tapes.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I got tapes. And back in the old days when I started in 1984. We shot everything on 3/4 inch, and then we bump it up to 1 inch to edit. So I got all these big reels of masters, where we did all that. It's just crazy stuff.
Do you ever think about, and I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you, but it'll tie back into this. So you were just recently in a docu-series called Earnhardt over on Prime, Amazon Prime on Prime. It was a 4-part series, and you were really good friends with Dale, and they had your perspective kind of throughout the episodes. And it made me start thinking about documentaries and all this old footage, because I just love, by my degree is production, that's kind of my love, right? And so seeing how they go back and look at all the footage that they had from back then in his early days and the Wrangler days and all this stuff. And it made me start thinking about our footage and Mark and Terry and all that old stuff. Do you ever think about yours and, going back, like there's gotta be gold in there as far as the amount of content you produce, like some of the funny stuff that happened or whatever it is, just the history, your life has been documented since the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, that's pretty incredible. 50 years of content, right?
We do a look back series. And so every Sunday on YouTube, we do a look back, and it can be a 1984 or 5 or 6 or 7 show. I've done several with, I fish with Larry Bird, I fish with Bo Jackson, I fish with Dale Earnhardt, and we release a lot of those old shows. But in reality, those shows are 22 minutes long, and we would shoot 3 or 4 hours. So I would love to be able to go back and get the raw footage. And when we get through with this run, show things that have never been seen before. We had some funny moments. Larry Bird was so competitive, and we cut about 90% of that out. He would use some foul language from time to time. So instead of bleeping, we just didn't use it, but it was so funny. And I would love to pull some. He's so competitive. I told him, I said, Bird, if I got on the basketball court with you, do you think that I would think that I could beat you? And he said, well, I hope you wouldn't, because you'd eat a few Wilsons. I said, yeah, I know that. If you get in my boat and you honestly think you're going to catch more fish than me, and you're so upset because I'm ahead of you. I mean, come on. No. He's going to catch the most fish. So he was so competitive. It was really funny. And so we cut a lot of stuff out. I'd love to be able to go back. And all these years that we had 5 hours worth of footage and only 22 minutes of it made the show, I'd love to go back and re-edit some of that stuff and bring it to life.
The reality is the style back then and what was acceptable to go in is much different than what's acceptable to go in now. And especially when you think about a look back or a throwback, like, I don't know, you can get away with a little bit more. Some of the foul language, you can bleep it, whatever it is. And people kind of have a different perspective of it. It's
more tolerant,
viewed as more tolerant, funny or whatever. And I think people would just eat that up. I think they would just love that.
It could be really, really good. And, back in our day, when we started in 84, the number of edits in a minute were like 2 or 3.
Pretty slow.
Andy and Mayberry, that was our benchmark. And so
with a 90-second dissolve.
To go back, we'd show the boat for 30 seconds just coming out behind a tree,
Really established that.
It put you to sleep today, but it'd be fun to speed those up and see what they'd look like.
Yeah.
This segment of 100% Wild is brought to you by PH Outdoors. Check out the full line of the G Series and brand new M Series drills at phoutdoors.com.
It's funny. I had the kids sit down with me and watch Red-Headed Stranger with Willie Nelson a few weeks back, and that's a super slow paced movie. The shots are forever.
Yeah.
But they were and these are YouTube generation kids. They're used to quick cuts and everything, but
and they're used to picking their content and moving on to the next clip.
Yeah.
The next channel.
I didn't have to compel them to sit with me. They hung and they watched. Red-Headed Stranger is probably not the best show for a movie for an 8-year-old to watch, but they hung with it.
Yeah.
But there is something, I don't know. It's comforting for me. It's a very familiar, because I grew up with that style of fishing show, hunting show. Even if you go back to the Drury Outdoors back catalog,
slow.
Everything is, it's just,
Our intros were like 5 minutes long for the videos. And they had a composer that composed the music part, and the shots were, you always, as an editor, they always say, don't fall in love with a shot. Well, they were in love with all their shots. They'd have a silhouette of the two of them, standing there, with the sunset for, it's felt like an hour. It's, 30 seconds it's up there, but it's a much different, you go back and look at that old stuff. It's just such a different production style.
If you look back at the old days when the Drury Outdoors, when they started producing their DVD tapes or
VHS title,
that went into Walmart, and I would buy those and Dream Season, and you watch Dream Season, the Drury's. I loved, because both Mark and Terry did an awesome job explaining their methods and how they went about finding this deer and all the stuff that they went through setting up to be able to get in position, the right wind, and they would explain all that. And that was my strength with my television. in my opinion, I wanted to set it up how I go to a lake that's 50,000 surface acres of water, never been there before, put my boat in, how I went about finding these fish that I caught. But today they don't want that. Man, they want to see you jerking them in. But to me, the value of the whole story is how you went about discovering where these fish were. But people don't have time for that. The value in those Drury Dream Season shows for me was how Mark and Terry was able to discern what they needed to do and scout and find and set up. The harvest was just the end.
Yeah.
And today people want to see you whack them and stack them, and they just want to see you shooting, and they want to see deer showing up. They don't want the time and the explanation of how we went about scouting and found this scrape line and found where they were bedding, and then we knew what wind we needed. They don't want to hear that anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah, you mentioned that, but I was looking at, I follow you on social media, and you had something about line tangle, and I'm not a fisherman, at all, but I found it interesting, the information of how you kind of took the viewer through undoing that line tangle and letting it float behind your boat. And it wasn't anything fancy. It was on social media. It wasn't like a highly produced piece. It looked like it was just an iPhone of you explaining what you do. And I still do think there is value. There are people out there that are still looking for that information online, but it's weird because there's different viewing styles on different platforms. And it's like, it's exhausting. You got to find the right, type of production for the right platform and that audience. I agree with what you're saying, but there definitely is still a consumer out there that's looking for that information somewhere.
It's just tough to weed
everywhere.
through. Yeah, it's tough to weed through the ego-driven side of the outdoor industry.
There's so much about the entertainment side that you have to be almost like a damn clown anymore. Like, oh, look, I'm dancing for you. What do I got to do to make you pay attention to get the information? But to me, being in the industry now 22 years, which is nothing compared to you, but I've seen a lot of it, and it's like, man, it's refreshing to see someone sit down and just give me the information I'm looking for. Right? It's refreshing to get that.
It is, and you got to, in order to be successful, and I realized this in the 80s, if you got to make information entertaining. You can't make it as if you're in a lab and you're laying out scientifically and all the facts. You've just got to go and state what is true about a particular product and how it works, but you got to do it in a fun way. And you got to show results. So it's a whole lot easier to talk about the durability of fishing line when you got a 6-pound bass around a tree and you get him around and the line is abrasion resistant, opposed to sitting in a lab taking a piece of sandpaper and showing how abrasive resistant it is. So you got to tie the two together, build the drama with the fish, but yet you get your point across that, hey, if I were not using this particular type of line, when he wrapped me around that tree, he would have cut my line. But this line is super abrasive resistant. So you tie it together, and all of a sudden you got an impactful information about a particular fishing line. But it happened in a dramatic setting that was entertaining. So you tie that together, and that's what made TV work.
And I think you always did such a good job of making it entertaining. I mean, knowing you a little bit on the on a personal side, not just on the TV side, you're fun and entertaining. Just that's your nature, right? That's just your personality. Your boys have it too. And I think that goes a long way because when you watch your content, it's fun to watch your content. And I'm sure that's been part of your brand almost, right? Through all these years, it's just fun to watch.
It's what Waylon Jennings said. I've always been crazy, but it's kept me from going insane.
Yep.
So we've jumped around a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the hunting side too, because I mean, you kind of stepped away from fishing, really what was probably in the prime of your career from the tournament side, right? And you decided that your boys and your family, and that was more important. You wanted to be there and make sure you were influencing them. And that really resonates with me, that especially in your generation, that was not the norm. right? That was abnormal. And it really wasn't something that guys at that time that I think the mentality was, I got to provide for the family and whatever that takes. And my wife will take care of the kids and make sure, that everything at home is accounted for. But you kind of stepped away from it all, right? And took a different path.
It was a lot of people say it was a tough decision. And I guess, you work and you learn and you get better and better at your game, and you still have physical abilities. And so I was 36 years old when I retired from tournament fishing, and I was at my peak. I was just really, really getting better. I had my best year ever the year I quit. But my moms do a fantastic job raising kids, but when boys get 10, 11, 12 years old, they need their dad, man. My kids wanted to go fishing. They wanted to go hunting. They wanted to race go-karts. They had all these dreams, and mom couldn't do that. And so I looked at it as I was being very, very selfish. And I was chasing my dream and doing what I wanted to do. And I was an absentee dad. And the guilt of that started bothering me the last 2 years, but I was not financially able. The one thing I will say about the Bassmaster Classic, it's life-changing money. To win that classic, and especially the second time I won it, I knew how to take advantage of all the promotional opportunities that was included with the title. So it afforded me the opportunity to make a living without having to compete to go forward. I'd won everything there was to win at that time. I was the first guy to ever win the Classic and Angler of the Year. I was the first guy to win the Grand Slam. I won the Classic twice. And so I had everything accomplished that I needed to for my own ego. And now I need to be a dad. And so it was an easy decision for me to make, difficult to carry out, because I had to go to the Classic every year, working with my sponsors and sitting on the sideline watching those guys come through, knowing I could be there was a very painful, tough thing to sit through.
That says a lot, though, about you as a person, because that's maybe even harder to. It's not just changing a career. You're famous, right? You're not only at the peak of a career, but there's fame and fortune that comes along with what you were doing.
And people probably encouraging you, like, hey, don't step out now. Like, we're all on this train. It's not just a decision that impacts you too. There's like a business.
That's a good
cadre
point.
around you.
Did you have any blowback from sponsors, or were they supportive of it?
Some of the sponsors had a really tough time with it. Most of them were okay. At that time, TNN was rolling. I mean, we were delivering 4 and 5 million homes a week with one airing.
That's crazy.
It was just crazy numbers. And so at that time, Campbell Ewald Advertising Agency, who represented everything General Motors, they had AC Delco, they had Chevrolet, they had all that. Man, they wanted to buy every minute of your airtime. Because the demographics just fit them perfect. Mm-hmm. And the CPMs of our show were far less than NFL football. Mm-hmm. And we were delivering direct to their audience. So they were standing in line to buy every second that you would sell them. So our Demnant sponsors didn't say much because they didn't want to lose out either. So it was not difficult from the sponsor side as it was the fans. The fans really, my fan base was really disappointed when I retired. And I hate that because they meant so much to me. But again, my family meant more. So I just sucked it up and went on down the road. 30
years later, you don't regret. You certainly hate that for the fan base, but you don't regret it. I mean, you have a healthy, happy family and you guys have created tons of memories afield, and that's, you mentioned the TV show. I mean, the TV show, which still goes on today. I mean, you guys were doing stuff, you get into the hunting side and whitetails, and it afforded you probably the ability to do so many different things because of the time, what's your time worth, right? And especially when you think about your time with family, I know you and Tim and I think about that a lot too. I mean, these are decisions that we've made to stick around our home area, the St. Louis
To be
area.
clear, we have separate families.
Yes.
We are not.
That's right. Good point.
We are married to women. We have separate families.
But
we
that,
don't get woke on you here.
that's right. But that's a decision you got to make. It is what's more important. And to me, that's the most important thing. And at some point, it pays dividends, not maybe in stocks and bond, but in love and health and, healthy relationships with your kids. Like, I don't know. That's more important, to me anyways.
I was at a press conference once, and there's always been an argument between Ricky Clunn and Roland Martin about who, both Hall of Fame fishermen, what's the greatest title, Angler of the Year or Bassmaster Classic. And so I was the first guy to ever win both. And so I was at a press conference. So they were trying to figure out the greatest moment in my outdoor life. Mm-hmm. And was it winning the Classic or was it winning Angler of the Year? And they said, tell us the single greatest moment in your outdoor life. Well, my youngest son, Timmy, has a passion for turkey hunting. Turkey hunting is my number one passion. If you could have made a living turkey hunting, I would have never been a bass fisherman. And I'm very particular. When we get out of the vehicle in the turkey woods, we don't talk. Mm. We don't talk. We'll talk when we get back to the truck. We'll talk when we get back to the camp. But when we're in the turkey woods, we're listening. We walk quietly, and we do not reveal human voices unless it's an emergency. So I was sitting down by a tree down by the river one early morning, and I was anticipating where this bird might be roosting. And I have my youngest son, Timmy, and he's got his little 410 shotgun, and he's sitting between my legs. And it's just one of those mornings that God painted the most beautiful sky that's ever been. And this big gobbler was right where I was thinking he may be, and he's hammering. Every time a Tweety bird, anything happens, this bird is gobbling. And every time he gobbled, my son Timmy would jump, and I could feel his little body shaking, the nerves, and it was just such an intense and beautiful moment. And we don't talk. I mean, that's the rules. And all of a sudden, he's pulling on my shirt. I'm thought, oh no, he's got to go to the bathroom. This ain't going to be good. And he was so overwhelmed with emotion for being there. He had big alligator tears in his eyes, and he looked up at me and said, Daddy, I love you.
Oh, God.
And, that would blow the Classic away. That blows Angler of the Year away. That was my most special time in the outdoors. And all these press writers looked at me like they didn't have an answer for that.
What a good story, though.
Yeah. I'm not tearing up or anything. It's just allergies right now.
That's right.
So just special, and those are the kind of things that are just sacred. And the outdoors is just such a wonderful place. And competitive fishing was fun, and it was exciting, and it allowed me to make a living. But that's not what fishing's all about. Fishing's all about camaraderie, friendship, family, and so is hunting. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to share and be with your kids in the woods, those are way more important than trophies and paychecks.
Yeah. Well, something else I've appreciated about your work in the outdoor space is that you continue to point people to the creator behind the creation. That seems to be the driving force behind what you do.
I never have had any plans. I get up every morning and I try to have a clean slate. I get excited when I get to go fishing. I get excited when I get to hang out with my kids. And you just take a day at a time. My faith, I got saved when I was 22 years old. My salvation is the most important thing in my life. I like to get up in the mornings. I like to read the Bible. I like to go through my devotions, and I like having an agenda that allows me to do the things that I love to do. And I've just had a dream career. I'm blessed beyond measure, and I don't even know how to explain it. But I will tell you, as you look back over life, I was up in Missouri, and I had a preacher friend of mine whose son broke his crossbow. and I needed a crossbow. Well, who in the world's going to loan you a crossbow? Well, I called Terry Drury. I said, Terry, you wouldn't happen to have a crossbow I could buy? He said, absolutely, Hank. Where are you? And I told him, and I was about 14 miles from where he was. And I said, I'll come and get, no, I'll bring it to you. I'll meet you. And you don't forget stuff like that. Those tight friends are what makes life so important. I don't even remember if we killed a deer or not. Mm. It's not important. But what is important is the generosity and the friendship. And so I look back at life and I got trophies and I got all this stuff. Man, it doesn't mean anything. What means things are your friends. And you talked about the Dale Earnhardt documentary. That was a hard thing for me to do because I loved that guy. He was such a good friend of mine. But I agreed to do that because I don't want his memory to die. And there's so many people that didn't know him. And he had more grit and determination to be successful than people understand. And he's an icon in my eyes, and he could be for the whole world if they knew him, if they really knew who he was. So when I make a friend, I appreciate a friend. And I wanted to do that documentary to keep his memory alive. And I do the same for Mark and Terry Drury. People don't realize how much work those guys have put into what they do and what they've brought to us. And I would say Mark Drury is probably the best deer hunter that ever breathed air. I don't think anybody's put as much work in it. I don't think anybody has loved it as much as he loves it. And what a story that is, to have a friend that is so driven. And that was the same story with Dale Earnhardt. He was an icon. He was so full of and determined of grit and life. And that's what I'm so appreciative at my age. I look back and it's all the friends and the opportunity, and there's no greater place than the outdoors. It brings that to life.
Well said. And that the documentary it's very touching, and you bring a perspective to it that, obviously no one other than someone that would have been a best friend, a good friend, because everybody, the intimidator, that persona of that icon is just one of a kind of a hard guy, right? A hard ass, so to speak. And you brought a human element to that documentary. Very touching, the stories, regarding, because I think what people may not know is your families were very close. Your sons, his son, daughter, that like you guys went hunting a lot together. You spent a lot of time together. It wasn't a transactional relationship. It was a true friendship. And so you had a point of view regarding Dale Sr. and his relationship with his kids, and just really some touching stuff in there that, you talk about the alligator tears. It makes you tear up thinking about your relationship with your family, your dad. And like I said, that generation is just a much different. They really didn't open up, right? And show those kind of feelings. And it was just neat for you to be able to share some of your personal interaction and connection with Dale. And I think it opens up and shed a whole new light on who he actually was.
Yeah, there's no doubt that a lot of people misunderstood him, but he was really a cool guy, smartest guy ever met. A lot of people, they talk about he's blue collar to the bone. He was blue collar to the bone, no doubt about it. But he was brilliant. He was brilliant. I don't know if they ever did an IQ test on him, but he parlayed that whole NASCAR souvenir business along with a guy named Hank Jones. They collectively worked on that thing and turned it into a multi-million dollar business. And it was all in their heads between Hank Jones and Dale Earnhardt. And they built that whole thing. So how amazing is that the insight and the foresight and how they went about making all that happen. And he was just smart as a whip.
Yeah.
Well, Hank, I'm curious if there's anything that you kind of gave to the series that maybe got left on the cutting room floor that you wish they could have included.
I knew they would not do it, but I told them, I said, the most important thing, I go all over this country and I speak and I do things, and everybody said, do you think Dale Earnhardt's in heaven? And I said, I never asked Dale personally about his salvation, but he brought an engine builder. I bought Darrell Waltrip's NASCAR team, everything but his cup team. And so I had my team, and Hank Jr. raced for me, and I had Neil Bonnet's son, David Bonnet, he raced for me. And so I had my team, and Dennis Fisher, who Dale brought over from California, built our engines. So about a month and a half after the Daytona incident, I was in Dennis Fisher's office, and Dennis asked me, he said, boy, I can tell you're missing your buddy. I said, Dennis, I miss him more than I ever thought I would, but yes, I miss him. And I have a lot of regrets. He said, what you regret? I said, well, I never asked Dale if he'd be in heaven. And he said, well, I did. I was sitting in the same chair I'm sitting in. Dale's sitting where you were sitting. And I asked him, I said, Dale, what's going to happen to you when they scrape you up off the wall and put you in a body bag? He said, Dennis, I'll be in heaven. And he said, Dale, why in the world would you go to heaven? He said, because I asked Jesus Christ to come in my heart and be my Savior. Dale Earnhardt's in heaven. If he did what he told Dennis Fisher, he did. So I wish they would have included that at the last of the documentary, but I know it was coming out of California, Ron Howard's group, and I was afraid they wouldn't use that. But I really wish they would have included that in the end, because there's 38 million people that have seen that documentary, and probably 37 million of them wonder about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. It's and I know you've jumped on Dale Jr.'s podcast. Was that before? I guess that would have been before filming for the docuseries. Yeah. And that's worth anybody going to check that out, because you talked about that. I think that was where you talked about that. I
had looked for the opportunity to have the right moment to try to tell that story to Dale Earnhardt Jr. And that podcast just turned out to be the right environment and time to disclose to him how much his dad really loved him. But I told him, I said, you owe me, you little rascal, because if it weren't for me, you would have never got that race car.
That's a funny story. So Dale, Dale Sr., he made those kids work for everything they had. They were going into the junkyard and buying scrap and putting these cars together. And Hank, you take it from here, Hank, and tell the rest of it.
Yeah, he said, I'm to do my kids like my dad did me. If they want to race, they can get out in the junkyard and they can get them a car and they can weld it up and they can go racing on their own. That's what my dad told me. I said, but Dale, when your dad told you that, he was racing a car that he got out of the junkyard. He wasn't racing for Richard Childers, who had 40 brand new cars flying around on a King Air, staying in a motor coach. You can't do that. That's dual standards. When your dad told you that, he was racing out of the junkyard, but you're not. So you can't tell your kids, that they can't have what you got. You got to be fair. And you could read the reaction on his face. Dang, I never thought about that. That's going to cost me a lot of money.
That's what good friends do.
They ended up with 3 cars. Each kid had a car after that, a brand new car and a hauler and everything. So that was a fun story.
You're good friends when they can call your BS. If they're willing just to say, listen.
Yeah. That's right.
That's a good friend.
So on the hunting side, you're a passionate outdoorsman of all things. So you talked about turkey hunting. Obviously, we went over the fishing. The whitetail side, I mean, that's kind of when I have gotten to know you. It was through the PSE days when we were all under the PSE flagship, and we'd kind of go out and do some of these photo shoots and stuff for them out in Tucson. And so what I've known of you is more from the whitetail side and the hunting side. And I know you've killed some giant deer, in your history, but you had a bit of a scare here this last year. You had a bit of a tree stand accident, right?
Yes, sir. Yep, I did. It was, safety is a huge thing for me. I was in Kansas a few years ago, and I was in another guy's stand who allowed me to hunt out of it. But because I was hooked up when the bottom of the stand, the two cables actually had rusted and they broke, and the bottom of that stand fell out. And I was about 38 feet high in that stand, and there were rocks below me. I'm certain it would have been a very tough thing to have survived had I not had my hunter safety system hooked up. And so from that period on, and that happened in about 1998 or 9, somewhere along there. And so it's always been lifelines. I've always been big on lifelines. So last September, my stepson, we had got a trail camera photograph of a deer where I had a stand, but that stand was not good for the wind we had. So I was going to put him up a different stand. And he's young and strong, and we're putting up a lock on, and he can put that lock on up more effective than me. So I said, let me go up there and put the lifeline around the tree, and then you can hook up and you can put the lock on up. So when I went up, I got up to the very top, and this was dumb on my part, and I've learned a lesson, and I'll never do this again. But when I got up there, I had ladder sticks. And that stick, the last part of the top of that ladder stick would not adhere to the tree. So it was a little flimsy, and I didn't like that. I didn't think it'd be safe for my stepson. So I wanted to make sure I secured it to the tree real tight. And so I got up on the very top run, which was 22 feet, and I jerked on that thing with both hands, and the strap broke. And that strap broke, I came out of the tree. But I was up there for the purpose of putting the lifeline on to be safe. Yeah. And I've talked with the guys at Hunter Safety System, and they're assuring me that they're going to have a lifeline that you're going to be able to put up from the ground. You don't have to climb to put the lifeline. I can't wait to see it. So I'm waiting on that. But right now, if you're going to put a lifeline up, you got to climb the first time. And that was the first time I was going up there for that purpose. And the strap broke, and out I came. So
you weren't, at the time, you weren't wearing a lineman's belt either, you're saying?
I had a very bad experience with a lineman belt about 6 or 7 years before that. If you're putting up a ladder stick and you're wearing a lineman's stand, I had on rubber boots, and I had my lineman belt on and going up that ladder stick, and my foot slipped off, and that lineman belt caught me and slammed my face into the ladder stick. I cracked 2 teeth, stuck a tooth through my lip. And it was terrible. So you got to be careful with a lineman belt if you've got metal in front of you, because if your feet slip off of those steps, as mine did, it's going to slam you face first into that ladder. So I don't wear a lineman belt when I'm putting up a ladder stick. So I don't know the argument about that. That's somebody with a better pay grade than mine to make that decision, but that can be really bad too. So I don't know. What I did wrong is when that thing wouldn't fix up and get up tight against that tree, I should have stopped right then, put the lifeline on, hooked up, and then jerked on that strap. Yeah. That's where I messed up. Or either forgot that strap and just put a ratchet strap on it and been done with it.
Yeah.
Well, even just talking about the education side of the outdoors, I think I remember one of your family members was maybe interviewing you while you were in the hospital, and you were telling people, wear your safety harnesses, be safe in a tree stand. Like, it can happen to anybody. So even in that moment of, oh boy, this, I'm really in a lot of pain and this is a really tough situation, you were still trying to educate people.
Yeah, I actually said wear a lineman belt, and I rethought that a lot since then. But I did say while I was laying there in the hospital, I said, don't ever do that again without wearing a lineman belt. But there's drawbacks to that as well. So I don't really know the answer to the perfect answer would be to be able to put that lifeline up with a pole of some sort while you're standing on the ground.
Yeah, that is the hardest part. It's like we use lifelines on all of our sets, especially after we used them a little bit, and then Terry had his accident. Probably 7-8 years ago, maybe. And after that, it's like, okay, everything, we're going to have a lifeline everywhere. And his accident was he was climbing up a tree and getting ready to hook in. And he grabbed a step, and I guess this tree at some point, like maybe got hit by lightning or something. There was a dead spot. And so where that screw and step was, it just pulled out. It pulled out. And the way he recalls it is it was just, you don't have time to grab or grab on. He's like, it's instantaneous. You're just on the ground, and we're lucky that both you guys are with us. I mean, you hear of a lot of pretty tragic tree stand accidents that happen. And it's not necessarily while you're hunting either, putting them up or climbing in. I mean, it's that getting up and down. It can be just as dangerous as anything. So yeah, we use the lifelines all the time now.
Yeah, my neighbor fell. The same rescue squad that got my neighbor out, he fell 18 feet the year before, the September before I fell, almost to the day the year before I did. And he fell 18 feet, and it broke his neck and killed him on contact. Oh. And the same rescue squad that got him out, it got me. They said, "Man, you fell further than your neighbor." But of course, at that time, I thought I was hurt, and they did a wonderful job. They put me on a board. They put a neck brace on me. They taped my head. They carried me out of the woods, put me on a helicopter, and got me to the hospital. And I thought I was hurt. I really did. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't move anything. And I thought, well, I'm probably going to be paralyzed for life. But my stepson, he works with a surgeon. And so he immediately knew, don't move anything. If you've got a severed spine, if you don't move it, there's hope, even if you've got a severed spine, if you don't cut those nerves, you got a chance of don't move anything. And that was really smart. And as it got, they MRI'd me for a brain bleed. I had no brain bleed. And then they checked my spine. I had no severed spine. So I was one of the few guys that's ever been brought in by helicopter and walked out 5 hours later.
Wow. Unreal.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very fortunate. We're getting to that time where people are starting to think deer hunting again. They're back into that mode of getting sets hung and cameras out and all that stuff. So it's a good reminder. And one of the reasons when I texted you a couple weeks ago, I wanted to just touch on this because we take it for granted and it can happen so quickly. And then, like you were fortunate, Terry was fortunate, but your neighbor was not, and it can change life for you and those around you very quickly. And so it's just not worth the rush or, just thinking through the safety side of it before you go into it. And having somebody with you is a big factor too. I don't know if your son or your stepson was with you.
He was.
That's a blessing. Doing what we do, a lot of times there's just somebody with us, and that's a blessing in these kind of instances where you got somebody that can help you in an emergency, or you can help in an emergency, and we're lucky in that regard. But it's always a good idea to have somebody or let people know what you're doing or where you're going, because things can change quickly.
Well, I'm an independent guy, but, to really honestly be safe, you got to be intentional about it. You got to plan. Mm-hmm. And it's foolish to do a lot of things that is required of a hunter. It's foolish to do it solo. You should have a companion. Lots of things can go wrong. Mm-hmm. Lots of.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that we could go on and on and on with you for hours, and I appreciate the hour you already have given us. I find it fascinating, the whole racing, caveat that you guys went down for. I mean, I just find that fascinating, and I think we could talk for days on that, because you alluded to it a little bit, but you had a team that. You had the cars, the team. Hank Jr. was really winning a lot of races. You yourself were racing. I mean, that's. To jump from fishing to hunting to racing, you're kind of like the world's most, the Dos Equis guy, the world's most interesting man.
Anything for fun, anything for a good time. But, it was, I'm like the guy now in AA meeting. I've been NASCAR free for 10 years. So I'm glad to be out of that. But we had a lot of fun. It's all about your kids. And that's what they wanted to do. That's why I did a hunting show. When they got out of NASCAR, Billy and Hank Jr., I wanted them both to join me with my fishing show. But they didn't want to do that. They wanted to hunt. So we started Flesh and Blood, and we started hunting, which was my passion to begin with. But I didn't want to mess up my hunting by doing a show. That's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. It'll ruin a hunting. It'll ruin a hunt, that's for sure.
They used to tell me all the time during turkey season, "Hey, Dad, we need a show. Could we send a cameraman to go turkey hunt with you?" And I said, no, absolutely not. No ball and chain. I carry that ball and chain all deer season. I'm going hunting by myself, and I'm going to hunt all day.
I think that's happening with my... Yeah, my son, I asked him if you want to go turkey hunting this year. He's like, "No, Dad, I think I'm more of a fishing guy." So I think I've kind of like screwed up the hunting side with all the filming and everything.
But hey, at least there's fishing.
Yeah. I was like, that's my first love. So yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, any closing, departing words for our audience here, Hank?
Just, I hope everybody knows how awesome you guys are and what you've meant to the sport. And you've done it right. Both your legacy, marketary, you've done it right. And you've been an inspiration to all of us. And I'm just so appreciative that you're carrying on and got the podcast up and rolling. And it's amazing how well you guys are doing and have done, and what you mean to me and what you mean to the sport. So I hope everybody that watches your podcast can appreciate your heritage, all the work that's gone into building this platform that you have today. And I'm glad you're carrying it on. You're doing an awesome job, and I'm very appreciative of that. And I'm super appreciative of you having me on.
Well, we appreciate the kind words, and Mark and Terry have set a great example, and it's those are big footsteps to follow in, but we certainly try to make sure that we're doing things the right way. And I think that's when I think of you and everything you've done and your legacy, that's right up there with all of it. Doing things the right way, being compassionate, caring for people, entertaining, informing. And so we appreciate the friendship, and it means a lot to us that you took time to jump on with us today.
Great to be with you, and I'd love to come back someday. So I'll have you on Off the Water one day.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, we look forward to it. So where can people find you? Where can they follow along, Hank?
We're on almost all the platforms with our podcast, Hank Parker Off the Water. We do a look back show every week on YouTube. I'm on the Pursuit channel with Hank Parker's Outdoor Magazine. And of course, we're putting up posts all the time on Facebook. So we're and TikTok and all the other platforms.
You must have somebody that's young. Well, your co-host, is that a granddaughter or a daughter?
My granddaughter.
Okay.
Yeah, she's the brains and the beauty behind the operation.
That's no doubt. There's always got to be somebody that's helping everybody move along with technology, right?
Yeah.
So I applaud you for continuing on to jump into these new mediums and continue to share the good word. And we just appreciate you. So thanks for jumping on today. And I think we're going to call it wraps.
Let's do it. Thanks, Hank.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, peace out.
I love it. You got it.
DeerCast movement prediction and mapping tools combined with our exclusive virtual rain gauges gets you ahead of your game.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV is brought to you by DeerCast Maps, waypoints, weather, virtual rain gauges, and more. Every tool you need to get ahead of your game.